Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. My name is Jesse. I know I have not been here for a long time. Apologies, but I'm excited to be back. Before we get into the episode, I will read this ad. Bet Online continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and ability to watch the games as they happen with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC. Head to Bet Online today. Don't forget to use promo code BELIEVE for your welcome bonus on your first deposit and Bet Online. The game starts here. All right, so we are going to do just sort of a fun holiday episode. I feel 90% or so confident that this is going to be the first, especially winter holiday episode that we have had on the Warehouse Podcast. And if you are uh, celebrating any of the holidays, I hope that you are enjoying it. I hope that you are having hopefully a good time with family and or friends or chosen family. And yeah, and if you don't celebrate, I hope that you are still finding a way to enjoy the holidays regardless, in some way, or not necessarily enjoy the holidays, but at least enjoy hopefully a little bit of time off work or enjoying the time period, I guess. So I know that, yeah. So what we're gonna do here, this is going to be sort of a holiday episode. However, I will be taking these very rich and very important holidays and very much reducing them down into almost nothingness to fit sort of the objectives for this episode. So we're going to be talking about the Orioles, and we're going to be using basically one element of each of the three holidays that are most frequently talked about around this time in the United States, and just sort of go from there, use one element of each of the holidays to then construct, just sort of some lists I have here. This is not going to be a deep and very extremely analytical episode. This is more just a fun episode. We're going to use the holidays to reflect on 2024 and then also use the holidays to think about the future in 2025 for the Baltimore Orioles. So, how we're going to do this is so not to sort of, which is sort of what how would I say this? Not to make these holidays, I guess, secondary. Of course, most people in the United States celebrate Christmas predominantly. However, we are going to start with Kwanzaa and Hanukkah because they are going to be sort of merged together in a sense, because Kwanzaa has 7 days to it. Hanukkah has eight. So the first thing that we're gonna sort of outline here, or I'm gonna sort of go through, is the seven positive, memorable, bright spots to the Orioles 2024 season. What Oriole fans and anyone who wants to think about the Orioles in 2024, what they should remember positively about the 2024 season. Then after that, I'm going to give one negative to remember about the Orioles 2024 season. The seven added with the one is going to bring us to eight things, which brings us to the eight nights of Hanukkah. And then after that, we will transition to a quote unquote wish list for the Orioles in 2025. Now, originally, I was thinking about doing the players or thinking about like what players I would like for the Orioles to have, to in an effort to not further commodify the players. I'm going to do sort of a modified version of that, where I'm not going to be talking about specific players I want or I would like the Orioles to sign. Um, Also, in part, I'm not doing it that way because that has already had a lot of discussion on this platform so far about potential free agents, potential trades, stuff like that. So it would be a little redundant for me to delve into that. But also, from the perspective of a lot of the free agents have already been signed, there's not a lot out there other than maybe Corbin Burns that Oriole fans are really, really, yeah, they're not a lot of players that would be game changers for the outlook of the season for the Orioles. Some could definitely make significant contributions, but of course, Juan Soto's, those caliber of players are already off the quote unquote board. So yeah, so we're just going to talk about what I would like and what I hope for to happen for the Orioles in 2025. Thinking about the Orioles in context, what has potential to go wrong for the Orioles in 2025, and focusing sort of on the things that I hope for to go right. So let's just start off. We're going to start with the seven positive things. This is um, quote unquote, I guess the best way to say it is a reference to Kwanzaa. So we're going to talk about the seven things that are positive that the Orioles can remember about and Oriole fans can remember about the 2024 season. So I'm going to just start off talking about three players who really, really made significant contributions to the Orioles this year that I think are sort of worthy and have put seasons together that sort of are worthy of their own right. So again, this is not comprehensive because, for instance, Corbin Burns is not on this list. Part of it, I think, is about also expectations. Corbin Burns, as great as he is, he sort of lived up to expectations. Um, so yeah, so I'm gonna sort of like go through a few three players who sort of exceeded expectations and I think had really memorable seasons that the Orioles could think about. So the first one is Jordan Westberg. So Jordan Westberg had, I think, Oriole fans at this point know. Uh, we're starting off here. I think Oriole fans know he had a really, really excellent season playing almost exclusively third base for the Orioles this year. He put up a 2.4 WAR. He had 18 home runs. He had nearly an 800 OPS. And he also had a few dramatic moments for the Orioles. He had some big hits for the Orioles, predominantly at the beginning of the season. He had a walk-off home run. He had another walk-off hit. And seeing Jordan Westberg doing so well was really critical from the perspective of the Orioles because we had just dealt away Joey Ortiz, part of the middle infield depth. Of course, Westberg is now at third, and Joey, very well, if he had stayed, could have played at third or may have been at third for us. He played third base for the Brewers. Uh, sort of third base, shortstop, either of them or both of those players could have slotted into each of the positions. Of course, with Gunnar Henderson on the team, he's going to be the shortstop. But with that said, yeah, Jordan Westberg, it was really important for him to have a critical year. This was like his age 25 season. He might have turned 25 over the course of the season, but he's sort of getting to that age where players, if they're going to have most of the time successful major league careers, they need to, at that sort of around that age, really need to sort of figure it out and sort of learn how to play at the major league level. And I think there was some doubt. I mean, I think Jordan Westberg had a lot of support within the Baltimore Oriole fan community, but there was some doubt as to how good a player he was actually going to be. And the Orioles, you know, basically, it seems like the Orioles sort of chose him over choosing Joey Ortiz. I think it was sort of a situation. I mean, maybe uh, they like Joey more, but in order to get Corbin Burns, they had to deal Joey. But I think that's unlikely. I think the Orioles probably liked something about Westberg a little bit more than they liked about Ortiz, and they ended up dealing away Ortiz. Now, Joey, in his own right, had a really good season with the Brewers, but at the same time, um, you know, given that we traded Joey away, it was really, really important that the Orioles sort of made a good selection and put a proper amount of faith in Jordan Westberg. And it really seems like they did. And he just had a really great season at third. He played great defense as well. So it wasn't just offensively that he did well, but he played great defense. And it was a really, really important season for his growth, for his development. Unfortunately, he did get hurt toward the end of the season, which really might have hurt the Orioles a bit heading into the playoffs if, he probably wasn't at full form uh, regarding timing and everything like that. So yeah, it was just really unfortunate timing, even though he did make it back in time for the playoffs. But yeah, so but it was really nice and really good that Westberg had a really great season. Yeah. So he's the number one on the list. And these, I should clarify, these aren't in any exact order. It's just sort of uh yeah, it's not in any particular order here. So the second thing happening here, or the second player, just gonna shout out, I think has to be Gunnar Henderson. He had a nine. I mean, this is just ridiculous. He had a 9.1 WAR over the course of the season. Uh, I mean, his power, especially in the first half, was absolutely incredible. He looked like he was on pace to hit 40 home runs. His power in the second half dropped off a lot, at least his home run numbers in particular, but his power in general. Um, but even with that, he still wound up with nearly 40 home runs, hit 37 over the course of the year, had an 893 OPS, a 159 OPS plus, and he did this all during his age 23 season, which is absolutely remarkable. Um, he is an incredible player, an incredible talent, and we'll see what happens for him moving forward if he's able to put up seasons like this year after year. Then the Orioles are in great position. He's going to be an amazing, incredible player, barring catastrophe or some major injury. Um, he should be an incredible player. But yeah, I mean, he was phenomenal this year. And he is the number two. Um, and then the last one, I think he really, really did great for the Orioles as well. In his contract year, in all likelihood, he's not going to be back with the Orioles. So we definitely have to give him some love on the show. But Anthony Santander, sort of a similar situation. I mean, it's amazing. He was going into his contract year too. He'd, for his career, normally hit in the ballpark of 30 home runs a year, and he just went off and hit 44. There was one month where I think he had 15. It seemed like he was hitting one every day, every other day. Absolutely incredible offensive season for him. We know he is not the best defensively, but he's definitely serviceable. But offensively, he was so critical to the Orioles this previous season in the middle of the lineup. Uh, he was absolutely great. He had an 814 OPS, a 2.9 WAR, which, like I said, that WAR is developed mainly due to his offensive abilities. And yeah, he had just a phenomenal season as well. So we're gonna transition from uh, them to the fourth positive for the Orioles this year, and just talking about the power. This was a topic that I had covered at some point or multiple times throughout the season. The Orioles in Major League Baseball hit second. Hit the second most home runs in Major League Baseball. They hit a total of 235 home runs, which was two behind the New York Yankees. For a long time, they were not only leading the league, or I'm sorry, leading not just the American League, but leading Major League Baseball in home runs, but leading that category by a lot. And then sort of evened out a little bit more. The Orioles had a great, sort of not to the same extent, but something resembling Gunnar Henderson's trajectory of power. Uh, Potentially there wasn't as significant a drop off with the Orioles team as there was with Henderson. Not getting into the details of that, but yeah, just yeah, I mean, the Orioles' power this year was absolutely incredible. They got power from many different players. Obviously, it was led by Santander and by Gunnar Henderson, but there were plenty of contributors to making that happen. Plenty of 20 home run guys on this team. And the Orioles were third in the league in slugging percentage, which says so much about the team. Yeah, both of those things say a lot about how the team is built, where a lot of their success came from over the course of the regular season. And yeah, they were just a power team. And hopefully, the Orioles are going to continue, even with the loss, most likely, of Anthony Santander this upcoming season. Hopefully, they'll still be able to put up some power numbers in 2025. So the next one here that we have, just want to shout out the starting pitching. I know we did some, of course, over the course of the regular season, we're going to do episodes on basically every facet of the team, but the starting pitching was great despite the struggles that it encountered. Now, of course, it was led by our ace in Corbin Burns, and he was fantastic and phenomenal. Um, but the Orioles did have some challenges with the starting rotation. So, of course, very early on, Kyle Bradish went down for the entire season. John Means went down for the entire season. So I think Bradish, the Oriole fans, were in particular hoping for to have a return this year. That didn't end up happening. John Means, I think, was always sort of more of a question mark just because his health has been a problem for him throughout his entire career. But Kyle Bradish, I think there was a lot of hope and a lot of expectation that he was going to return and come back and dominate, and that just didn't happen. So with both of them going down, there was also a Tyler Wells injury who may not have played a significant role in the starting rotation, but may have played a role in the starting rotation throughout the course of the year. Um, so there was a lot that was sort of, you know, uh, a lot of challenges that the Orioles rotation was presented. Potentially on its surface, you would have thought on paper, excuse me, given these challenges, um, that the Orioles would have struggled a lot more with the starting pitching. Um, and even if we're looking at it, even Grayson Rodriguez and Dean Kramer, they didn't put up their normal number of innings pitched that they're capable of due to injuries themselves. Granted, not for the extended periods of time, or the same length of time that like Bradish and Wells and Means. But with that said, they spent some time as well. So there were a lot of challenges. I mean, definitely, I think Mike Elias deserves some credit in this department, going out and getting Zach Eflin and helping to sort of stabilize the rotation a bit. And then, of course, I think we talked about him a bunch on this program over the past year as well. Albert Suarez, absolutely incredible. Turned into at his late age of I think 34. Don't quote me on that, but I think 34. Um, yeah, Albert Suarez was a stabilizing force in the rotation as well. Was absolutely incredible, and it was great for him. And yeah, definitely excited to see how he fits in either to the rotation or the bullpen next year. Um, so now we're gonna close out this section of the episode, just talking about sort of two events that sort of happened. This is we're still in the seven positive, so we're on the sixth positive. And what I'm thinking about is Corbin Burns, Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, Anthony Santander, and Jordan Westberg all going to the All-Star game. The Orioles sent five All Stars, which is absolutely incredible for us to the All Star game. Anthony Santander had a little fortune and a little luck to be able to get into the game. He was sort of a last minute addition, but he did make it there. The Orioles sent five players. This was tied for the most the Orioles have had for other than a few times in the late 60s and early 70s. For those of you out there who were watching the Orioles during that time, or know just anything about the history of the Orioles, those were some absolutely incredible years for the Orioles from a baseball perspective. Multiple times the Orioles sent in those years six, seven players even during that time period. Excuse me again. Um, but like in recent, at least if you look past the 80s, the Orioles have never sent more than five players. So the Orioles sort of tied for the most the Orioles have sent after the 80s. I know that's not exactly an amazing statistic by itself, but it does sort of give uh, some sort of understanding about how good and how talented this team was and how many talented players were on this team this year for the Orioles. So of course sort of in conjunction with this, Gunnar Henderson did get to participate in the home run derby. um Unfortunately, things didn't go as well as Oriole fans were hoping for. He did get knocked out in the first round, but he also didn't embarrass himself. Some people on occasion show up to the home run derby, and whether it's pressure, whether it's nerves, whatever it is, they just sort of like do really, really badly and underperform. And he at least didn't do that. He had like a decent showing. So at least he didn't if he did badly, it wouldn't have been like embarrassing for him, but like something akin to that, like if he had two or something. So, yeah, so he participated in the home run derby, but I think it did just speak to, especially with the Orioles sending things or sending all these players to the All-Star game, it did speak to the tremendous talent that this Orioles roster had. And for the seventh and final positive, to remember the Orioles 2024 season, and this is to conclude the Kwanzaa section of the episode, Gunnar Henderson, we're going to return to him, breaking the record for most home runs by a shortstop. So he hit it in the first inning against the White Sox off Jonathan Cannon. It was a 3-1 pitch. It was a September baseball game, and the game was actually rather miserable. It would have been nice if he had hit it in any other game in that series, because the Orioles won the other three games of that series. And other than his solo home run, Gunnar Henderson's that is, the Orioles did not score anything else, and we lost 8-1. Albert Suarez took the loss in that game, and it was really unfortunate. So, yeah, the O's had won 3 out of 4 in the series. It would have been nice if he had hit that home run. Apologies. If he had hit that home run with the excitement in the other three games. But baseball works out like that sometimes. He did break the record though, hitting at the time his 35th home run. He did hit two more after that, of course, as previously referenced. And yeah, he broke the record of both Cal Ripken and Miguel Tejada, who had previously shared the record, the home run record for Orioles shortstops at 34. So yeah, a lot of credit to Gunnar Henderson. Speaks again to the incredible season that he had, and yeah, it was a really, really exciting. I think Oriole fans were there was some anticipation for it. I think uh, like there was a little build up, and we were sort of wondering, okay, when are you going to hit it? That kind of thing. And especially after the first half that he had, where he put up like 27 before the All-Star break or whatever it was. Um, yeah, I think Oriole fans were sort of had that in mind and were waiting for that to happen. Speaks a little bit to how the game has changed, how the shortstop position has changed in Major League Baseball. But nonetheless, he's incredible. And yeah, I think every Oriole fan doing any sort of due diligence about remembering the 2024 season should remember that accomplishment that he had. All right. This brings us to the one negative, and this is transitioning us into Hanukkah, and which this is ironic because, despite all the negative, or not even negative, but the sad Jewish holidays that exist, Hanukkah is not one of them. But we are going to use Hanukkah to talk about the one negative thing that I think Oriole fans need to remember about the season. Um, so before I actually say what it is, I do think that I need to do some due diligence and mention a couple honorable mentions here. So one honorable mention I think that needs to be or that should be remembered in a negative way if we're thinking about the Orioles 2024 season. I referenced one of these two injuries earlier, Kyle Bradish injury, but I think also we have to think about the Felix Bautista injury as well. Having both of these absolutely incredible pitchers, granted, Bradish being a starter, and Bautista being a closer, they're slightly different. There were other injuries, like I mentioned earlier, with Means, but like I was saying, I think that there was sort of more expectation for both Bautista and Bradish than there was for Means this year. So I think both of those injuries were really, really critical. I think it was really, really important that the Orioles didn't have either of those players contributing. It, informed how a lot of the season went for the Orioles. And yeah, potentially, uh, I think that if they had been present throughout the season, not saying we would have won the World Series or anything like that, but it could have definitely changed the trajectory of how some of the things went. Like one thing impacts another, even though the starting pitching was good this year, even though the bullpen was decent or okay. You know, both of those players, if they had been healthy and performing, would have made significant contributions. Who knows? Maybe the Orioles don't end the season as rockily. Maybe they don't get the wild card. They don't get paired up against the Royals. I mean, there's so many different scenarios of what could have happened. I'm not trying to dwell on that, but I am just trying to point out that, I think that if we're thinking and remembering the Orioles 2024 season, that we can't forget that we missed out on both of these juggernaut players for the Orioles. That would have been incredible to have had throughout the season. So hopefully they'll both be back for next year, but we will see. The other honorable mention, I think, we've harped on it a lot. I don't want to go dwell too much on this, but was Adley Rutschman's offensive second half of the year. I don't have to rehash that too much, but it was just absolutely dismal. And if we're thinking about the negatives, this is just like something I think that is really, really hanging on in Oriole minds. And I think the significance of it is because it does bring up some questions about the trajectory of his career. So maybe some people would think that's too much of a stretch, but I don't really think so. I do think, you know, it does raise questions, just regarding health, regarding ability to catch every day or close to every day. So it does raise some questions about, what his uh it might give some indications as to the direction his career is headed. So we'll see if he fixes things and he puts together a nice, consistent offensive season next year. We'll see if he breaks down sort of how he did this year. Um, I mean, it also raises questions potentially about the Orioles, workload management, training staff, all these sorts of things. But if we're thinking about the 2024 Orioles, Rutschman being such a critical figure on the team, it's hard to forget about his offensive second half. What I was going to say, though, getting the honorable mentions out of the way, was just the playoffs and the playoff losses to the Royals. We had some fortune in the first round being matched up against a fairly mediocre playoff baseball team. Not to harp or criticize too negatively about the Kansas City Royals, but for a playoff baseball team, they were pretty bad in general, despite the great teams that they had in the mid 2010s. I know Oriole fans remember them well. I do. But I think that, you know, when we're thinking about the playoffs, this was really sort of ultimately the Orioles did, their job to some extent, got into the playoffs. Uh, and how we flamed out. Even if the Orioles had went out a different way but still lost, I think it would have been more tolerable. But just the way, uh, so first of all, the losing streak in the playoffs for the Orioles being extended to 10, of course, is really unfortunate and negative. Five under Brandon Hyde, I believe. So yeah, I mean all that. Yeah, five under Brandon Hyde, three against the Rangers, two here. So all that is really unfortunate. But yeah, okay. I just had to double check. Yes, it was three against the Rangers. So yeah, all that was just really, really unfortunate. And yeah, just how the Orioles did it with the offensive struggles. It would have been one thing if, we lost 6-4 one game and we lost 5-3 the other game or something like this, right? How the Orioles lost with absolutely zero offense, that is what really, really stings. And really, really, I think, we're gonna remember. And wasting the Corbin Burns stellar performance, the having the opportunities that we did have to score, not doing it, all the things that we talked about, we harped on. Um, so I think if you're looking at like the big negative of 2024, I mean, you could talk about not winning the division. You could talk about winning 10 less games than the Orioles did last year. You could talk about all that, but really what matters is the playoffs. And not only did the Orioles not win a playoff game, a single playoff game, we scored a single playoff run in 18 innings due to one solo home run by Cedric Mullins. And it was pathetic. And we could have scored another run just by getting hit by a pitch, but Colton Cowser chose to swing, not choose. Choose might be too harsh, but he ended up swinging, perhaps involuntarily, but just a disaster offensive performance. So for me, that really is the negative of 2024 for the Baltimore Orioles. All right. So, three things heading into yeah, so this is heading into 2025. The three things that I am hoping for, this is to resemble Christmas. Sort of not to overemphasize the, I guess, materialistic part of Christmas, but in terms of what I'm hoping for, this is the quote unquote wish list for the Orioles 2025 season. So, the first thing that I would say, um, and I guess these I will sort of put in some sort of order here. But I'll start with sort of, I guess, what my least important would be out of the three, is that Gunnar Henderson not necessarily repeat the power that he had last year with 37 home runs, but at least putting up something comparable in terms of home runs. Now, there are areas you can look at on the Oriole team, and hopefully you can anticipate or hope for more power to compensate for Anthony Santander's loss, for instance. Uh, of course, we have Tyler O'Neill now. You can look at maybe someone like hopefully Jackson Holliday has a good year. And yeah, I mean, so there are other areas to compensate, but especially with the loss of Anthony Santander and his 44 home runs he brought for us last year. Um, it would be nice if Gunnar Henderson put something comparable up, even if he put 25 up, which would be incredible for him. Well, let me revise that. It wouldn't be incredible for him. That would be very, very good for a shortstop. That would be more than sufficient. He'll put up even with 25 home runs, he'll put up a stellar offensive year, most likely. Um, so even if he had 25 home runs, like that would still be good. And if we were looking for improvements, we would absolutely look around the diamond before we would look at Gunnar Henderson. With that said, though, we now have seen what he is capable of. And it would be great if he at least put up uh, maybe the mid 30s, give or take a few, 33, 37, somewhere in that range, even maybe, 31, like as low as, but somewhere in that range would be great. And, keeping the OPS somewhere in the ballpark of 900, maybe even going higher than 900. He definitely, I think, is capable of that at some point in his career. Um, yeah, so that is sort of like one thing that I would hope for the Orioles this upcoming season. The second thing is not as much focused on one player, but it is about the health of particularly the starting pitching. Um, so even, you know, we're gonna look at like Kyle Bradish. That is sort of the focal point of when we're thinking about health. But you could extend it to Tyler Wells. If you think about now, granted, he might not be in the rotation, right? That's a different question, and he probably has a more difficult avenue to the starting rotation, given what the rotation looks like this year for the Orioles. But you know, also we have to think about like Grayson Rodriguez. And he is someone that we know, I think Oriole fans know what his potential is, how talented he is. Um, and, we just uh, sort of want him to reach that sort of potential that we know he has. And part of that is him staying healthy. So if Grayson Rodriguez stayed healthy all year, that would be incredible. So my hope is in particular for the Orioles in 2025, particularly the starting rotation, to stay healthy or as healthy as possible. If we have an injury, have it be for a couple weeks, not for 2, 3 months. That might be a lot to ask for with the starting rotation, but we'll see. So that would be the second thing I'm hoping for. And then that those things are sort of leading up to the final thing. And what I'm hoping for in 2025 is that the young players that we have on this team take a big step forward. And I think that when we're thinking about that conversation, I think it starts with Jackson Holliday. Um, Given the expectation, given the that he was a first round draft pick, given these sorts of things, um, given that he is already in the major leagues at his young age, given all those things, I think when we're thinking about the young players that we really want to take a big step forward this upcoming year, it starts with Jackson Holliday. It certainly doesn't end there. Um, we could also look at Kobe Mayo. We're hoping he takes a big step forward as well. And then another guy that could make an appearance for the Orioles in 2025 that hopefully can take a big step forward, Samuel Basallo. I think there is so much rightful excitement, so much excitement from me for him, and just the Orioles community in general. So if he could make the major leagues, maybe at the end of the year, and show something, yeah, not hit for 120, with no home runs and whatever, but if he could like show a glimpse at least or flashes of his capabilities. That's what I would hope for from him in 2025. And then, yeah, I think with Holiday and Mayo, I think, just having I mean with Holiday, he did show glimpses like for a month or so in 2024, but overall, as far as overall as a hitter, not really. I mean the defense was more or less there, but the offense was not. And Kobe Mayo sort of the same thing. Granted, much more limited possibilities with Mayo, given limited playing time relative to Holiday. But still, it'd be great if he could sort of step up offensively as well. So I mentioned Basayo. And then if you even want to look at the pitching, you could look at Povich, you could look at McDermott. And then even offensively to a much lesser extent, um, Colton Cowser taking another step forward. He did take a big step forward this past year. But thinking about him, either progressing or putting up something comparable offensively and defensively, or doing something comparable offensive and defensively to what he did last year. Jordan Westberg's kind of the same thing. So that is really what so much of this team is based on its young talent. And in order for the Orioles to be successful, we really need these young guys to really step up, make improvements, and sort of start assuming their potential in Major League Baseball. So that is like the ultimate. I think if we're looking at a potential all-star Jackson Holliday, or not even necessarily that, but like, a middle of the pack second baseman, Jackson Holliday at his young age, that would be incredible, So that's what I'm really looking and hoping for the Orioles in 2025. So we're gonna wrap up this very, very shallow holiday episode of the Warehouse podcast. So apologies that it was so shallow. Unfortunately, if you are really into the holidays, this is an Orioles podcast. So I tried to blend the two together to the extent that I could. But in any case, yeah, I'm sure that it was not sufficient in the sense of my more or less tribute to the holidays that we are going through right now. So, apologies for all that. But with that said, thank you so much for listening. I hope that this did serve as a lighthearted sort of episode of the Warehouse Podcast. Um, yeah, and like I said at the beginning, I hope that people who are celebrating are enjoying the holidays, or at a bare minimum, you're if you're not celebrating the holidays, that you are just enjoying your time and enjoying, I guess, to the best extent that you can, life on this earth. So just like any other time period, I guess. So anyway, yeah, thank you all so much for listening. Feel free to follow the show. Feel free to give us a 5-star rating and review. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Feel free to like the video. If you have any thoughts on the show, feel free to comment with your thoughts, analysis, disagreements, etc. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can feel free to email us, thewarehousepod@gmail.com. Please go to Instagram, go to Twitter, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at The Warehouse Pod. And thank you all so much for listening to this first ever, I'm pretty sure, 90% sure, this first ever holiday edition of The Warehouse Podcast. My name is Jesse, and go O's.